In 1991, an Indian economist named Manmohan Singh stood before Parliament and said something that would have been unthinkable 5 years earlier. We must liberalize. We must open our economy. The room was tense. India had 3 weeks of foreign reserves left. The country was hours away from default. Gold was being airlifted to London as collateral for emergency loans. Within 18 months, the license Raj, a system that had controlled Indian business for 40 decades, would be dismantled. Industrial licensing would vanish. Import restrictions would collapse. Foreign investment barriers would fall. Entire industries that hadn't existed would emerge. IT services, business process outsourcing, pharmaceuticals, automotive exports. By 2000, India would have a thriving software industry employing hundreds of thousands. By 2008, it would be the world's back office. By 2023, it would be the 5th largest economy on Earth, with a GDP exceeding $3.7 trillion. Something happened between 1991 and 2023 that transformed the trajectory of 1/6 of humanity. Not through central planning, not through state control, not through the mechanisms that built other Asian giants. This is not a story about socialism or capitalism. It is not about left or right. Those are the words used to describe it afterward. This is the story of what actually occurred. And it begins decades earlier, in a place where economic ambitions go to suffocate under bureaucracy.
The year is 1947. India gains independence. After 200 years of colonial extraction, the country is impoverished. Infrastructure is minimal. Literacy is 12%. Life expectancy is 32 years. The new government faces a choice. Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first prime minister, chooses planning. The model is Soviet-inspired. The state will control the commanding heights of the economy, heavy industry, infrastructure, finance. In 1951, the first 5-year plan is announced. It focuses on agriculture and irrigation. It succeeds modestly. The second plan, launched in 1956, is different. It prioritizes heavy industry, steel plants, machinery, chemicals. The state will build these sectors. Private enterprise will be restricted. To control private business, the government introduces the Industries Development and Regulation Act of 1951. It requires licenses for starting new businesses, expanding production, or changing product lines. What begins as regulation becomes suffocation. By the 1960s, getting a license requires approvals from multiple ministries. Applications take years, rejections are common, bribes become standard. Businessmen call it the license Raj. Raj means rule. It is the rule of permits. The system creates perverse incentives. Companies don't expand because expansion requires licenses. They don't innovate because new products require licenses. They don't compete on quality because competition is restricted. Instead, they compete for licenses. Meanwhile, India closes itself to foreign trade. Import tariffs reach 350% on some goods. Foreign companies are restricted. Technology transfer is limited. The stated goal is self-reliance. The actual result is stagnation. Between 1950 and 1980, India's economy grows at roughly 3.5% per year. Population grows at 2.2%. Per capita income barely increases. Economists call it the Hindu rate of growth. The phrase is insulting, but it sticks. By 1980, India's GDP per capita is lower than sub-Saharan Africa's average. South Korea, which had similar income levels in 1960, is now 4 times richer. But something is shifting. In 1977, the Congress Party loses power for the first time. The Janta Party coalition takes over. It lasts 3 years before collapsing, but it opens political space. In 1980, Indira Gandhi returns to power. She begins cautious reforms. Industrial licensing is slightly relaxed. Some imports are allowed. The changes are minimal, but growth accelerates to 5.5%. Then, in 1984, Indira Gandhi is assassinated. Her son, Rajiv Gandhi, becomes prime minister at age 40. Rajiv is different.
He is not an ideologue. He is interested in technology. He surrounds himself with younger advisors. Between 1985 and 1989, Rajiv Gandhi liberalizes cautiously. He reduces licensing requirements in some sectors. He allows limited foreign investment. He lowers tariffs marginally. He permits companies to import capital goods. The reforms are half-hearted. Powerful interest groups resist. The bureaucracy slows implementation. Opposition parties attack him as pro-rich. But something unprecedented happens. A computer industry emerges. In 1984, Rajiv Gandhi reduces import duties on computers and components. He allows private companies to manufacture and sell computers without licenses. Companies like Wipro, Infosys, and HCL begin experimenting. They start as hardware traders. They move into software services. The shift is accidental. Indian engineers are skilled, but hardware is expensive. Software requires minimal capital. India has English-speaking graduates. Wages are low. By 1990, India has a small but growing software services industry. But Rajiv Gandhi loses the 1989 election. The reforms slow. And then, in 1990, Iraq invades Kuwait.
August 1990. Oil prices double overnight. India imports 70% of its oil. The cost of imports explodes. Simultaneously, the Gulf War displaces Indian workers in the Middle East. Remittances collapse. India's foreign reserves begin falling. The government borrows to cover the deficit. Debt rises. In 1991, political instability worsens. The government collapses. Elections are called. During the campaign, Rajiv Gandhi is assassinated. The Congress Party wins, but without a majority. P.V. Narasimha Rao becomes Prime Minister. He is 70 years old. He is seen as a caretaker. No one expects bold action. By June 1991, India's foreign reserves have fallen to $1 billion, enough to cover 3 weeks of imports. Default is imminent. India approaches the IMF for an emergency loan. The IMF agrees, but with conditions. Devalue the currency, cut subsidies, reduce fiscal deficit, liberalize trade. India has no choice. On July 1st and July 3rd, 1991, the rupee is devalued by 18%. Narasimha Rao appoints Manmohan Singh as finance minister. Singh is an economist. He studied at Oxford and Cambridge. He worked at the IMF and the Reserve Bank of India. He is known for competence, not charisma. On July 24, 1991, Manmohan Singh presents his first budget to Parliament. He quotes Victor Hugo, "No power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come." Then he announces the most sweeping economic reforms in Indian history. Industrial licensing is abolished for most sectors. Import quotas are removed. Tariffs are slashed. Foreign investment limits are raised. The public sector monopoly is ended in most industries. The changes are radical, but Singh's presentation is calm, technical, almost boring. He does not mention capitalism. He does not attack socialism. He frames the reforms as necessity, not ideology. The opposition is fierce. The left calls it a betrayal. Unions protest. Industrialists who benefited from licenses resist. But Narasimha Rao provides political cover. He manages coalitions. He negotiates. He delays votes. He uses procedural tactics. The reforms proceed. Within 2 years, the economy stabilizes. Foreign reserves rise. Growth accelerates. Inflation falls. But the real transformation is only beginning, because between 1991 and 2000, something happens that no one fully anticipated. A new economic structure emerges, and it does not look like what came before. In 1991, India has virtually no private telecommunications. Phones are rare. Waiting lists for landlines stretch for years. By 2000, India has 35 million mobile phone subscribers. In 1991, India's software exports are negligible, less than $100 million. By 2000, software exports reach $6 billion. By 2008, they exceed $40 billion. In 1991, foreign investment in India is under $200 million per year. By 2000, it exceeds $4 billion. By 2008, it surpasses $40 billion. What happens during this decade is not planned, it is emergent. The government removes restrictions, entrepreneurs fill the vacuum. In telecommunications, private companies are allowed to compete. They build mobile networks. They undercut state-owned providers on price. They expand coverage faster than anyone expected. By 2010, India has over 800 million mobile subscribers, more than any country except China. Monthly plans cost less than $2. The telecom boom is not driven by state planning, it is driven by competition. In software, the story is different but equally unplanned. In the 1990s, American companies face a problem, the year 2000 bug. Legacy computer systems store years as 2 digits. When 2000 arrives, systems might fail. Fixing this requires thousands of programmers to review millions of lines of code. American programmers are expensive. Indian programmers are not. Companies like Infosys, Wipro, TCS, and HCL offer services. They send engineers to the US. They work on site. They charge a fraction of local rates. The year 2000 problem creates demand. Indian companies scale rapidly. When year 2000 passes without disaster, the work doesn't stop. American companies realize they can outsource routine programming, then business processes, then customer service. India becomes the world's back office. By 2008, the IT and business process outsourcing sectors employ over 2 million people directly and millions more indirectly. Cities transform. Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Gurgaon become technology hubs. Glass office buildings rise, highways are built, airports expand. This is not state-led development. The state provides infrastructure eventually, but the growth is driven by private companies responding to global demand. But this creates a paradox. India is growing rapidly in services, software, finance, telecommunications, but manufacturing is stagnant, agriculture remains inefficient, infrastructure is inadequate. The economy is creating millions of jobs for English-speaking graduates, but it is creating fewer jobs for the hundreds of millions without higher education. Inequality rises. Urban incomes surge. Rural incomes grow slowly. The political consequences are predictable. In 2004, the BJP coalition loses the election. The slogan, "India Shining," backfires. Rural voters feel excluded. The Congress Party returns to power. Manmohan Singh becomes prime minister. The new government pursues a different approach. It continues liberalization, but it also expands social programs. The National Rural Employment Guarantee Act guarantees 100 days of paid work per year to rural households. Food subsidies are expanded. Education spending increases. The approach is pragmatic. Growth continues, but redistribution is prioritized. Between 2004 and 2008, India's economy grows at over 8% per year. Poverty falls, literacy rises, and then, in September 2008, Lehman Brothers collapses. September 2008, global credit markets freeze. Exports plummet, foreign investment stops, stock markets crash. India's growth slows abruptly, from 9% in 2007-2008 to 6.7% in 2008-2009. But India does not collapse. Unlike in 1991, India has foreign reserves, over $250 billion. The banking system is healthier. Capital controls limit exposure to global financial flows. The government responds with fiscal stimulus. It increases infrastructure spending. It cuts taxes. The central bank lowers interest rates. The measures work. By 2010, growth rebounds to 8.5%. But the global crisis reveals something. India's growth model depends heavily on domestic demand, consumption, investment, services. This makes India less vulnerable to global shocks than export-dependent economies, but it also creates challenges. Infrastructure cannot keep pace with growth. Roads are congested, ports are inefficient, power supply is unreliable. Bureaucracy remains a barrier. Land acquisition is difficult. Environmental clearances take years. Corruption persists. Between 2010 and 2014, growth slows. A series of corruption scandals erode public trust. The government is seen as paralyzed. In 2014, the opposition BJP wins a landslide. Narendra Modi becomes prime minister. Modi's background is different. He's not from the political elite. He governed Gujarat for 12 years, focusing on industrial development. His approach is activist. He launches initiatives, Make in India to boost manufacturing, Digital India to expand internet access, Clean India to improve sanitation, Skill India to train workers. Some succeed, some stall. In 2016, Modi announces demonetization. Overnight, 86% of currency in circulation is invalidated. The goal is to combat black money and push digital payments. The execution is chaotic. Cash shortages cripple small businesses. Informal workers lose income. Growth slows. In 2017, the government implements the Goods and Services Tax, a unified tax replacing dozens of state and central levies. The reform is necessary. India's fragmented tax system is inefficient, but implementation is rushed. Small businesses struggle with compliance. Both policies, demonetization and GST, cause short-term disruption. Growth fell to 6.5% in 2017-2018, but Modi's political support remains strong. He wins re-election in 2019 with an even larger majority. And then, in 2020, the pandemic arrives.
March 2020, India announces one of the world's strictest lockdowns. 1.4 billion people are ordered to stay home with 4 hours' notice. The economy contracts by 24% in the second quarter. Millions of migrant workers lose jobs. They walk hundreds of kilometers back to villages. Supply chains collapse. The government responds with emergency relief, food distribution, cash transfers, loan guarantees. But the bigger shift is structural. The pandemic accelerates digitalization. Mobile payments surge. E-commerce expands. Remote work becomes normalized. It also exposes vulnerabilities, dependence on Chinese imports, weak healthcare infrastructure, fragile employment. The government begins emphasizing self-reliance. The policy is called Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India. It is not autarky. It is about reducing strategic dependencies. India raises tariffs on certain imports. It restricts Chinese investment in sensitive sectors. It offers incentives for domestic manufacturing in electronics, pharmaceuticals, and defense. In 2021-2022, the economy rebounds. Growth reaches 8.7%. Foreign companies begin seeing India differently, not just as a market, as an alternative manufacturing base to China. Apple expands iPhone production in India. Samsung increases investment. Tesla announces plans. The shift is gradual but significant. Meanwhile, India's digital infrastructure advances. The Unified Payments Interface, a real-time payment system launched in 2016, processes over 10 billion transactions per month by 2023. It is free, it is instant, and it works across all banks. India's digital ID system, Aadhaar, covers over 1.3 billion people. It enables direct benefit transfers. It reduces leakage and subsidies. These are not market-driven innovations. They are state-built platforms that enable market activity. The model is distinctive. The state builds digital infrastructure. Private companies build applications on top. By 2023, India is the world's 5th largest economy. It has the 3rd largest startup ecosystem. It is the fastest growing major economy. But challenges remain. Job creation is insufficient. Manufacturing employs less than 15% of the workforce. Agriculture is still 40%, productive inefficiency. Infrastructure is improving but inadequate. Education quality is uneven. Healthcare access is limited. And politically, tensions are rising. Debates over religious identity, federalism, civil liberties. The economy continues growing, but the social contract is under stress. Between 1991 and 2023, India's economy grew from $270 billion to over $3.7 trillion. Over 415 million people were lifted out of poverty. Literacy rose from 52% to 77%. Life expectancy increased from 59 to 70 years. No other democracy has achieved this scale of transformation in such a short time. But the mechanism behind this transformation is not what it appears. It is not pure capitalism. The state owns major banks, it controls key infrastructure, subsidies remain extensive. It is not socialism. Markets allocate most resources, private enterprise dominates most sectors, competition is widespread. It is not a planned economy. 5-year plans exist, but are largely symbolic. Growth is driven by decentralized decisions. It is something different. A system where the state removes restrictions but retains strategic control, where markets allocate resources but the state builds foundational infrastructure, where private enterprise thrives but social programs expand simultaneously, where growth is pursued but equity is politically necessary. This is what made the transformation possible, and this is what makes the future uncertain. Because the system depends on one condition, that political consensus supports continued reform while managing inequality. For 30 decades, it has held. The question is not whether it can continue. The question is what happens when the contradictions intensify. In 1991, Manmohan Singh stood before Parliament and said India must liberalize. The economy opened. Millions prospered. In 2008, the global system collapsed. India responded with stimulus, and recovery followed. In 2020, a pandemic shut the world down. India's economy contracted by 7%, then rebounded. Each time, the system adapted. Each time, growth resumed. But each time, new challenges emerged. There is no conclusion here, no lesson, no prediction. Only a fact. The transformation of India's economy is not a model to be replicated simply. It is not an ideology to be celebrated uncritically. It is not a story with a clear ending. It is a structure, and structures do not collapse suddenly. They evolve, and when they do, the consequences are not immediate. They unfold.